So I told you that this assignment was intentionally repetitive, and one of the reasons this was intentionally repetitive was to show you the benefit of a for loop. So let's look through this code that we wrote for that selection project. So we got their letter grades, then we used this if statement to convert one letter grade, two letter grades, three letter grades, four letter grades. Then once we were done, we added them all up, divided them by four. And then we used another if statement for their GPA. And well, you can see already here, we're at 223 lines of code. Yes, some of that is comments, but a lot of that is code. And we could definitely simplify this. Anytime that you find yourself copying and pasting code, I want you to ask yourself, could I do this as a loop? Um, I'll come back to this question again because there's two ways to handle repetitive code that we learn in this course. But the first one is loops. So if you're doing something over and over again, ask yourself, could this be a loop? And in this case, this can be. So we said, what is your letter grade for class one, two, three, and four? This is repeated. We created four variables here. That is repeated lines of code. This if statement was repeated multiple times. And in fact, each of them was repeated four times. But what we've learned is that we can have some code that repeats multiple times and that changes slightly. So let's do that. So let's create our for loop. So for, where do we want to start counting? Well, in the last video, I started counting at one, but in general, computers start counting at zero. So generally, you want to start your counters at zero. So I'll say let counter equal zero, semicolon. Counter is less than four because it'll do zero, one, two, and three, and that is four times. And so the loop will run four times. If we said it's less than or equal to 4, then it would do 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's actually 5 times. So we want it to run from 0 to almost 4, and we want it to go up by 1 each time. This will make it so that the loop will run 4 times. Well, one thing we want to do is we want to run multiple lines of code because we've got those lines of code, and this if statement is definitely multiple lines of code. So we're going to use the curly braces. And so now whatever we put in here will run four times. I'm going to take this and I'm going to hold the option, or if you're on a Windows, you can hold Alt and hit the up arrow to bring it into the for loop. What this would do is it would take a letter grade and it would ask the user for a letter grade. And so we'd say letter grade 1 equals prompt. What was your letter grade for class 1? So there's a small problem with this. This is hard coded, but we want it to adjust. So the first time we ask, we want it to be 1, then we want it to be 2, then we want it to be 3, then we want it to be 4. Well, what we could do is we could take advantage of this counter, which is already going up four times. So we could say letter grade 1 equal prompt, and then we'll use backticks. You could use concatenation. I prefer formatted strings. So I'm going to put another backtick here. And where we put one, we'll put $ curly brace. And now we can put our counter. So just gonna highlight everything else and comment it out by hitting Control or Command slash, and we'll save this. Now, if we go live, we'll see what was your class grade for class 0? A, 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 A. So you notice that did 0 through 3, which is what we expected because we put our counter at 0. One way you can handle this is you can say counter plus 1. The reason this works is we're not storing this anywhere. We didn't say counter equals counter plus 1. We just said counter plus 1. So we're saying we're going to take whatever counter happens to be and display whatever it is plus 1. So now this will display 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now our variable name doesn't make a whole lot of sense because this is no longer just storing letter grade 1. The first time this loop goes through, it's storing letter grade 1, but the next time it's storing letter grade 2. So maybe it'd be better to just call this variable letter grade. Well, once we did that, we gathered four inputs and then we store, and then we set GPAs to be 0. And maybe we'll do that again. So let's grab this line and hold Option or Alt and hit the up arrow. Oh, the up arrow, not the down arrow, to bring it up into your code. And we'll say, let GPA equal 0. After we did that, we ran a conversion. So I'm going to grab this if statement here. Sorry. Bang the wrong key. Oh my gosh. We're going to grab this if statement here, and then we'll hold the Option or Alt key, and we're going to move it up. Into our loop. Okay, it is now in our loop, and we're going to uncomment it by hitting Command/. Okay, so we said if their letter grade is A, we said letter grade 1, and in all of these cases, we don't want the 1 because we've called this letter grade. So we'll get rid of letter grade 1, and if you hold the Option key or the Alt key and click in multiple places, you can put your cursor in multiple places, and we'll delete that. So if we save this, we are now saying get a letter grade, create a GPA for it, and then set that GPA based on what the letter grade is. So at the bottom, we could alert GPA. So now if we go back to here, it says, what is your letter grade for class 1? If we enter an A, it says, what is your letter grade for class 2? And actually, I'm going to hit cancel, cancel, cancel. And I'm going to reload this because I don't think it reloaded after the last time. So what is your letter grade for class 1? A. And then it tells us that is a 4. What is your letter grade for class 2? B minus. It tells us that's a 2.7. So it looks like our converter is working and it's able to take in all 4 letter grades. So let's come back over here. And we don't need this alert anymore. We're able to get a prompt, convert them all to letter grades. But what we probably want to be doing is, if you notice at the bottom of all of this, after we did all of the letter grades, we had to calculate the total GPA, which was summing up each of the letter grades and then dividing it by 4. We could do this step by step. And so what we could do is we could create a running variable that stores the total GPA. So total GPA equals 0. Then we'd gather a GPA and then we'd add it to that GPA. So we'd say total GPA equals total GPA plus whatever the GPA for this letter grade is, or if we want to shorten this, plus equals GPA. So what that does is it's the same as summing up all of the GPAs. So um, instead of taking GPA 1 and adding GPA 2 and then GPA 3 and then GPA 4, we just said take the GPA and set it to whatever the first one is, and then add on the second, then add on the third, and then add on the fourth as you go through the loop. And then you'll notice at the end, we do need to divide by 4. So we're going to come after the loop. So the for loop is the yellow curly brace. So all the way down to the next curly brace, and we'll say total GPA equals total GPA divided by 4. Or if you want to use compound assignment, you'd say divide equals 4. And that gives us the exact same GPA that we got last time. Now, all that's left once we've gotten that GPA is to do the last if statement, calculating their total. And so I am just going to grab it with Option and the up arrow, and I'm going to bring it up a whole long ways. I probably should have just cut and pasted at this point. Oh well, you live and you learn. So you bring it all the way up, put it right under total GPA, uncomment it, and if we scroll back down, that was the last line of code that we needed to run. So now if we look at our code, our for loop code, it is lacking some comments, but using a for loop from line 14 to line 70 is all of the code that's needed to do the assignment that previously took all the way to about line 223. So because we didn't have to repeat those if statements, we only had to write one if statement. And then we, inside of the loop, instead of having to write four different if statements, we only had to write one prompt instead of four prompts. And we were still able to accomplish the same result. And that is the power of the for loop. If you see yourself duplicating code over and over and over, then maybe you should use a loop that will allow you to write the code once and run it multiple times. So we'll save this just to prove it works. And we'll say, what is your letter grade for class 1? We'll do an A minus, a B plus, and a B. And that gives us a GPA of 3.5. Says, great job. Your consistent efforts paying off. Keep challenging yourself and building on this progress. And so in much, much less code, we were able to write something that accomplished the exact same thing. And we'll pick up more on this in the next video. Thanks for watching.